أيها المبعوث فينا جئت بالأمر المطاع جئت شرفت المدينة مرحبا يا خير داع. His eyes slowly rising, sunrise warms the horizon.
The Y Factor.
It's the 19th of July, another Thursday and another Y Factor episode. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, dearest listeners. We're delighted to have another Y Factor episode. And because we are nearing the holy month of Ramadan, we thought we might have a special sort of episode for you this week. So first up, we interviewed the awesome Sheikh Wesam Charkawi about Ramadan, what it means, how to have a God-centered Ramadan, how to reap the most out of this Ramadan, and how to, inshallah, ensure that at the end of Ramadan, we have earned Allah's blessings, forgiveness, and, paradise, inshallah. After that, we speak to a representative from Amnesty International, as well as two representatives from the Rohingya Muslim community in Sydney about the atrocities that have been occurring against our brothers and sisters in Burma. You've all seen the news articles, you've all heard it. SubhanAllah, heart-wrenching things. But we're very delighted to actually have these people in the studio to interview them to tell us more about their situation. So stay tuned. First up, we have Sheikh Wesam Charkawi, and followed by that, we have the feature on the Rohingya Muslims.
The Y Factor.
Now, alhamdulillah, this is a really, really special time for us because Ramadan is upon us again, a month of blessings, of mercy and of forgiveness. And the Y Factor team is actually really excited because we have Sheikh Wesam Charkawi joining us in the studio today. Welcome, Sheikh.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sheikh, what is Ramadan? Like, what's the heart of Ramadan beyond the actual rigorous, procedural aspects? What is Ramadan?
First of all, let me start by saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. I'll explain that in two ways. The first, I'd just like to explain what Ramadan, the term Ramadan from a linguistic point of view. One scholar, or a number of scholars, said that the word Ramadan originated from the word ar-Ramda. And the word ar-Ramda is the burning heat of the sun. So they said, as a consequence of this, it was given the term Ramadan, indicating that the person's sins are burnt in Ramadan through his obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the crux of Ramadan, why? What is the heart of Ramadan? I cannot go beyond the verse that Allah says in the Quran, where He says, "Kutiba alaykum as-siyam," fasting has been made obligatory and prescribed for you. كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم, just like it was for the people before you, لعلكم تتقون, just so that you may gain taqwa, so that you may gain this taqwa. Now this is a thing where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, now what is taqwa? Taqwa, Allah did not say in the Quran here so that you may go through pain. He did not say so you may go through pain. He did not say so that you may go through starvation, and neither did He say so that you may become healthier. He said لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, in order that you may gain piety, which is righteousness, closeness to God, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the whole point of Ramadan. Ramadan is not just about abstaining from food or water. It is to gain that piety in oneself, and this is through his a'mal that he does in Ramadan.
So I think what you're trying to say is that things like gaining health or, feeling how the poor people feel and things like that, they're ancillary, but the primary reason is the taqwa and attaining that taqwa, the God consciousness.
This is the primary goal, absolutely. But this is the primary goal, but that's not to say there are not numerous other benefits of without a shadow of a doubt there are, such as to get what it feels like to be hungry and to be poor. So this is the whole point. So at the end of Ramadan, a person, what does he do? He contributes, sadaqatul fitr, he gives to the poor. And these are part of the benefits as well. But the primary is to gain that taqwa and to gain that piety in one's life.
Sheikh, with taqwa, how do we measure taqwa? Because, sometimes, as a person, you go through life, you've got your ups and downs. Sometimes you feel like your iman is so low, you just can't concentrate, you can't concentrate in your prayers. Sometimes you feel like on iman high and want to take on the world. Is that what a taqwa measure is? How do you know where your taqwa is at? Like, what's the...
Look, I'll answer that through the following question that was posed to me. One person said... about a week ago, why do I feel dead the fact that Ramadan is coming up? To me, it just feels like another Ramadan. And really what he was saying is I'm not feeling anything. I'm not feeling anything. It's like he was saying my iman is dead. Now, there are many reasons why a person's iman might go down. There are many reasons. Now, one of those reasons is because a person, he commits disobedience. He goes against Allah's commands, or he makes light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands, or he leaves the call to do good and forbids evil. He doesn't do that anymore. So when a person, he keeps away from these things, these awamir, these commands that Allah gave him, he will find that yes, he will see many things as normal because he's veered away from where Allah wants him to be. So in the like sense, when a person, he feels that taqwa, basically it's a feeling of the heart. He feels it within himself. And he feels, like you just said, he feels like a pump. He feels as though a contentment within the heart. And that's what it's about. Indeed, the contentment, ghina nafs, which is contentment of the heart. It cannot be in the materialistic things of this world. It just will not be found. So that taqwa, it will be felt in the heart. It's a contentment which a person, spiritually, he will feel enlightened. So when a person is saying, I feel dead, as opposed to that, when a person is saying, I feel good, I actually feel something, I feel like I want to do, and he's going to the masjid, and his actions are tantamount to what he's feeling. He's going, he's praying in the mosque, he's eager, he's given to the poor, he's abstaining from haram, he's not swearing, he's not lying, he's not committing or transgressing the bounds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala performed. When he's engaging in all of these things, these are all indicative signs of taqwa.
I mean, because I'm just thinking about it, like particular to our context, which is we're living in a non-Muslim country, and so obviously it's not like the whole country shuts down during Ramadan. We have to continue going to uni, going to work, and sort of the whole society just continues on sort of oblivious to this challenge that we're trying to face. And so what tips do you have for people in this particular context about how to maintain that sense of spiritual awareness, even when they're at work, at uni, and all that?
How to maintain a spiritual awareness? Yeah,
especially during Ramadan.
Look, everywhere a person goes in life, he can never forget himself. He can never forget who he is. The Prophet ﷺ, and this is something that I was covering today, despite everything he had in his life, the Prophet was establishing a society. The Prophet was bringing something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet was, in a sense, fighting on the one side, repelling hypocrites on the other side, combating things from every angle that you could possibly imagine. Yet he was able, at the end of the day, to give the haqq, for example, of his family. He never deprived them of anything. So the Prophet, if you look at the Prophet, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, that we are ummah, a wasata. We are, in a sense, a medium or a middle people. At the end of the day, a person, if he gives the haqq of everything, if he gives the rights of everything that is deserving of the rights, then he will not go wrong. And a classic example is that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, for example, to give the rights of the road. And what are the rights of the road? He said that if you see someone, that you afshi salam, that you give the salam, and another of those things, that you lower your gaze. So these are little type of things, and they're not difficult, and they're done by many people. They're done in society. We know a person can definitely do it. But just as a person, he realizes that these are the little things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him, and just be mindful of Allah at these times. Yes, he is fasting, but fasting, again, like we said, is not just about abstaining from food and water. Fasting is about abstaining from all of those things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden, not only inside Ramadan but outside of Ramadan. But even the situation is more highlighted within Ramadan. But to the crux of the question is, a person can really never forget that who he is, and he is a Muslim. So at the end of the day, even whilst he is fasting, he should realize what entails and what comes with fasting. And what comes with fasting is not, for example, for a person to overreact and lose his temper at other people and say, I am fasting, or please leave me alone, or I have no patience for this. No, it is about discipline, and many people have spoken about this in previous days. It is about discipline, and it's about discipline in terms of food. It's about discipline in terms of spirituality. It's about discipline in terms of one's tongue. It's about discipline in terms of one's desires. So it is about discipline, and a person really, he cannot forget that. So he has to constantly remind himself and constantly bring those to his attention.
Sheikh, I think this theme of discipline that you're speaking about is really important, because in a society where we are kind of encouraged to take everything to the limit, you know, with Nike's logo, just do it. You know what I mean? There's no kind of bar or stop to desires, to wants, to needs and things like that. And you kind of feel like the nafs is having a field day, you know, just getting everything it wants. So with Ramadan, when you try to curb that, as you said, either physically, spiritually, developing taqwa and things like that, it can get actually a bit hard, because we're not used to telling our nafs no. Like, we're used to, you're hungry, eat, you want this, get it, you know what I mean? So in Ramadan, how do you actually encourage us to start training our nafs in Ramadan and taking that training beyond Ramadan? So what are some small tips that we can actually start off with Ramadan, like as a warm-up, and then take that to continue for the rest of our lives?
The main thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He expects us to do the things that we should normally be doing. So that is that we should definitely be making our prayers, and we should be making our prayers. And for the men, Taraweeh is very vital, and we should be engaging in all of the sunan as well. So even the Prophet ﷺ, he said, indeed there is barakah in the suhoor. So if a person, there is barakah in that. So in sticking to all the small things, the little things, but they make a difference. They make a difference. But I want to answer your question from a different angle. I really want to attack it from a different angle, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said fasting is like a shield, provided the person does not ruin it. So this indicates that, or damage, this indicates that a person can damage his fast. And it goes to what you're saying, that there are desires and a person may fail. This also indicates a person may damage his fast, and it's very important. That's why we said it goes back to the heart of taqwa. It is all about that discipline of oneself in order to gain that piety with Allah. Now, in terms of practicality, look, Ramadan, the atmosphere is a lot easier. The Prophet did say that the doors of heaven are opened, the doors of heaven are closed, and the shayateen are chained. So the atmosphere in itself, it allows for actions to be done far easier than it would be outside of Ramadan. That's definitely a given. And the atmosphere just breeds sort of ibadah. It's in the air. So it is sort of, it's a big aid from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But definitely we cannot leave and abstain from those small things that generally where there's barakah in them or where there's khair in them, such as, for example, about breaking our fast early, or the barakah of suhoor, or abstaining from foul talk. So these little things, by engaging in these little things and acting upon these little things, they go a long way to curbing those desires. And this is coupled with the fact that anyway, Ramadan, there is an atmosphere where a person does find it a lot easier. But yes, a person should make himself a plan. If he is in the habit of performing sins, and he's a habitual offender, then yes, he should make himself a plan. And he make himself a plan and stick to that plan. So, for example, he says to himself, today, in this day, I am not going to lie. I am not going to lie. And he make that and he stick to his goal. And he stick to what he said. And for example, the next day, he give himself another plan, and so on and so forth. It's in these little things when he sets himself these achievable targets, through achieving these achievable, setting himself these achievable targets, inshallah, through his hard effort towards these things, he will achieve them.
Well, in terms of targets, so maybe we can come up with some things that are very important for people to focus on in Ramadan. So there's obviously the issue of like personal spirituality and developing that spirituality. There is family, and I think sometimes we often neglect the importance of family and things like that. There is a community, and that whether it be the Muslim community or the wider community. What are some other targets that people should be working towards?
Absolutely. Look, the family is very, very important in Islam, and there's no doubt about this. The family is very, very important. And I see sometimes in a lot of Ramadans that have passed, that sometimes you see that people are fighting with each other, or they're angry at one another, or family members don't speak with each other, or a person he engages in so many hours away from the mosque, or away from the ibadah, or away from all these things. If I could just highlight in regards, first of all, to the family, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has emphasized the family to a great degree, and so has the Prophet ﷺ, that a person, even if you look at what Allah said, he said, وَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرُهُمَا, that even a person should not even say uff to his mum. This does not only exist within Ramadan, this exists always. It is a general thing for all time. Absolutely, if a person is having any issues with his family or with his parents or whatever the case may be, this is the best time for conciliation. This is the best time for a person to break his nafs. This is the best time to break his ego and just apologize and just say sorry. This is where, at the end of the day, the Prophet, there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that the loser, the real loser is the one who actually lost is the one whose parents were alive yet he did not make it to paradise. This is the one who is the real loser. Now you imagine Ramadan. Ramadan is a time of forgiveness. Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ, he got up on the minbar one day and he said, Ameen, Ameen, Ameen. So then they said, Ya Rasulullah, why are you saying why did you say Ameen these 3 times? The first thing that he said, after that, he explained what the first Ameen was to what, and he said, Jibreel came to me and he said, if Ramadan comes and a person is not forgiven, he will enter the fire and Allah will cast him far away. Say Ameen. So I said Ameen. So this is an indication that this month is about a month of forgiveness. It can be ruined. It can be damaged. So being harsh to others or harsh to one's family or harsh in any way, shape or form without cause is indeed almost a means to a person ruining his fast. So we have to be careful of that.
Well, I just want to go back to that point that you mentioned about how it's a lot easier to do acts of worship in Ramadan. And so we get this phenomena, people call them Ramadan Muslims, where there's people who, they all of a sudden you see them in the mosque, they're praying, and then as soon as Ramadan's over, they're just gone. So I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to ask is how can we convert those acts? Because it's, as you said, it's quite easy to sort of perform extra acts of worship in Ramadan. How can we sort of convert those acts into more long-term sort of goals?
Consistency. Consistency. Al-istiqamah. Without a shadow of a doubt, when a person, he's consistent. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves, that if a person were to do an act, and even if it was a small act, but he does it with consistency, this in the sight of Allah is great. Consistency is the key. But you're right, once a person leaves Ramadan, he goes back to his normal ways. There was one thing I was saying to the people is a person should act and try and implement changes in his life before Ramadan comes around, whilst he's still subject to the same things outside of Ramadan. Therefore, when he implements the changes before Ramadan, they become a lot easier after Ramadan. But that's not to say we don't want a person to act in Ramadan and do his best. Of course we do. We want a person to maximize for Ramadan and get everything that he possibly can from it. But the best way is consistency. To be consistent in his actions, and after consistency, a way of helping with consistency is a person to surround himself with good people. Those people who remind him of Allah. Those people, when he sees and he meets, his knowledge of Allah increases. They are true friends. If you want to tell me about a person, tell me who his friend is. There are a lot of things that a person can do to maintain that consistency in his life, and one of those things are moving. First of all, you have to move away from what you were previously engaging in, and one of the first things to be able to do that, or to allow you to do that, is to move away from who you were. Obviously something was driving you to do those negative things and that disobedience to Allah, and so we say move away from that negative crowd that you were associated with. Move away from them. By moving away from them, you allow yourself a far greater opportunity to do good. So that it goes a long way. I believe in a person to try and maintain that thrust that he accumulated in Ramadan.
Sheikh, this is maybe being a bit cynical, but you find a lot of people, even during Ramadan, they haven't given up the sin, right? So if shaitan's locked up, does that mean that these people, or us who do commit sins during Ramadan, we're inherently bad? Look, what's the deal if shaitan's locked up but we're still sinning?
One scholar said that the main shayateen are locked up. The main ones are locked up. So that was the interpretation given by one sheikh, and I would quote him for what he said. And at the end of the day, a person, look, I'll say this, even though, this is very important, I want people to know this, even though the Prophet said, alayhi salatu wasalam, heaven, the doors of heaven are open, the doors of heaven are closed, and the shayateen are locked up, does that mean that the examination is over? No. Does that mean just because Ramadan came around that the examination is over? Absolutely not. The examination is ongoing, and the examination does not cease until death. So this is sometimes people, there is a misconception There is a misconception as like there's no more examination, or there's no more. The examination is ongoing, and it remains ongoing, and it's never ending until death. And this is something. This is the actual gist of the matter. That regardless of if shaitan is locked up or not, or the main ones are locked up or not, but you're still being examined. You still have your nafs, you still have your desires.
But what does that say about someone who, even with Ramadan, is committing sin?
Well, this is tantamount to his disobedience of Allah and his bad behavior. Absolutely. If somebody goes to the extent, and like I just said, if a person and look at the seriousness of what the Prophet ﷺ said, to say to the extent that forgiveness was not given. And in another hadith, there's another hadith which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, he who observed the fast of Ramadan with faith and seeking Allah's reward, all his past sins will be forgiven. You look at quite the contrary, where the Prophet was saying that if a person fasted Ramadan and a person is not forgiven, and then he will be cast into the hellfire. So this is an indication of the seriousness if a person, he did not give the haqq of Ramadan. So a person can damage Ramadan. And this only basically shows a person's complete disregard. Should he endeavor to just disregard the hududullah, the boundaries that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set in place. This is if a person were to give that up, it's his loss. He will be the one who's lost and missed out. So that says a lot about a person who just treats Ramadan like any other day, as though it is nothing. As though it is nothing. And many people will waste the Ramadan this year. If I could just add this. Now, last year, there was so much issue and debate and so on and so forth. And I really, truly believe that you know, the core of the matter had to be the taqwa of Allah. That was the whole basis. So my advice to the people is, wallahi, this year, do not engage in bickering. Do not worry about this moon issues or that moon issues or what this is or what that is. Don't engage in these issues. Focus, come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Come back to Allah, focus on Allah, make that your priority. Don't make anything else your priority. Those other issues, leave them to the mashayikh, leave them to the scholars. But this issue about Ramadan, about fasting, about taqwa, make that your priority. Leave the other issues. And at the end of the day, I believe that this is very important, that we stay away from that bickering and we get back to what Allah really wants from us.
I just want to ask, because at the Ramadan event on last Friday night, I found it really interesting that one of the sheikhs suggested that we should decline all invitations during Ramadan. And I thought that was a really interesting point because, already all the invitations started pouring in, trying to lock you in for this day, that day, to have iftar together. And I'm just wondering, your perspective on that. Do you think that socializing, because it is a big aspect of Ramadan, people have made it a big aspect. Do you think that it has too much emphasis on the social aspects?
And sometimes you see people that you haven't literally seen since the last Ramadan.
Do you think that sort of detracts from where our focus should be? It should be on our personal spiritual journey, or do you think that's part of the added bonuses?
Look, what the sheikh said on the Friday event about not accepting invitations, and both of them said it. Both the mashayikh said it. Look, I understand completely where they were coming from. I really do. What they were saying is Ramadan is not a time of food. It isn't really a time of food. It's a time of discipline. And at the end of the day, if you look at, for example, what Dr. Zakaria Matthew said, he made a very valid point. He made a point where he said sometimes these big organizations invite you and they have on their table massive amounts of food and a lot of it goes to waste. Wouldn't it be better just to limit that food and give what we would have paid in charity? And he made a very, very valid point. And I have to agree with that. But it doesn't mean that it's forbidden if you had an invitation by, for example, your brother or your sister. It doesn't mean, no, it's not. Without a shadow of a doubt, it's not unlawful. And they weren't trying to say it was unlawful. Yeah. They were just saying as a matter of discipline, and that's really what they were trying to say. But, look, there's nothing wrong in having, for example, a family where the family's together and they come together and they eat together. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And I always say, as long as nothing takes you away from Allah, as long as nothing takes you away from the deen of Allah, there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely. And they know that, and they know they weren't saying anything to the contrary.
Yeah.
They were just really talking about it from a really spiritual point of view, trying to maximize what you possibly could get out of Ramadan. But no, look, there's no harm, and even they will tell you this, there's no harm in inviting people.
And there's that hadith about actually having the rewards of the fasting person.
Absolutely. Look, there's no harm in accepting an invitation and going an invitation, but look, provided there's no waste. Provided there's no waste. This is very important. You know, we have to be very mindful of that. People around the world are dying. People around the world have no means. People around the world don't have what we have. Wallahi, we are very, very fortunate. So we have to keep them in mind. And at the end of the day, should you accept an invitation, as long as you don't break the rules that Allah has prescribed, there is really no issue. There is really no issue.
Is there a matter of like excess? Because you know how there's so many iftars. Like honestly, if I wanted to, I could go like 4 every week.
It comes back to the previous point about what you were saying about having that companionship, right? A lot of the people that work full time, Ramadan is only like you only feel Ramadan in the breaking the fast and the Tarawih. Someone who doesn't break their fast and has it as dinner as they usually do and doesn't go to Tarawih, how do they feel Ramadan otherwise? So I totally understand where the Mashaykh are coming from about not going to excess and disciplining yourself. But I think sometimes a major part of the Ramadan atmosphere is breaking fast with people, sharing that, like accomplishment with people, especially with converts and people that don't have families and things like that. Like I think that having that jovial atmosphere of we've both succeeded, another day of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fulfilling his commands, I think it's a major part of it.
Look, there is no problem absolutely with accepting invitations, provided obviously the invitation is Islamic law for it's permissible. So there's no problem in that. But I'll tell you where sometimes Mashaykh have sort of just said, look, this year be more disciplined, is because sometimes what's happening is a lot of the people when they accept invitations, they bloat themselves and the purpose sort of becomes lost, and the sort of
it's
objective,
more about eating than fasting.
It becomes more about food. It's sort of the objective sort of becomes a bit drowned out, and that's where sort of the Mashaykh are coming from in terms of discipline and nafs and refusing invitations, and they said that at the thing. But as long as the person he's adhering to those rules, there is really no issue. But sometimes people definitely have got lost. They bloat themselves and they come to the mosque on the first day or second day.
Or sometimes they can't even go to the mosque because they've eaten
Sometimes they don't even go to the mosque. And sometimes they don't even go to the mosque because they get caught up in the atmosphere of being invited, and people don't end up going to the mosque. So
the women get caught up in cooking and spend the whole day cooking instead of worshipping.
And this is the downside. But look, that's what we're saying. If a person can avoid all of that, and if you were to be invited, there's no harm. If my mum invited me, no problem, no issue. I'm going. But at the end of the day, I'll look after myself, inshallah, and I won't eat too much, and I'll make sure that I make the mosque. This is very, very important. As long as I'm observing all those things. But where the Mashaykh are coming from, they also have a very valid point in saying, look, don't make the objective about eating. So it's really what they were saying was this: don't make the objective about eating. If the objective can be about fasting, only fasting, there really would be no problem in invitations. But don't make the objective about eating. That's really what they were trying to allude to.
All right, Sheikh. I think just before we wrap up, a final reminder to the young people out there that are listening to us about making this Ramadan an unprecedented Ramadan, making it a Ramadan of change, and making it honestly like the best thing that's happened to us all year round.
Look, I believe this Ramadan is a special Ramadan. That's a big question. But I believe this Ramadan is a special Ramadan. I'll tell you why. First of all, I hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He allows us enough life to make it to Ramadan. I am hoping for that. It's a special time. It's a time where the Quran was revealed. It's a time of revelation. It's a time of rahmah. It's a time of blessing. It's a time of forgiveness. It's a time of Quran. It's a time of so many things. Itqun min an-nar, being free from being emancipated from the fire. It's such a special time that the one who wastes Ramadan will be the loser. He will be the one who was lost out. Can you imagine that this Ramadan, that even if a person in his life were to commit sins and fill the earth with sins, and fill the earth from the ground to the sky with sins, but this Ramadan, dedicate this Ramadan to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can you imagine what Allah will give him? Can you imagine that he were to make it count and that he were to be given forgiveness on this one Ramadan? Imagine how he would see that on the Day of Judgment. This Ramadan is about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's about coming back to Allah, reconnecting to Allah. Look, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, When a person, he sins, a black dot stains his heart. If he sins again, another black dot stains his heart until his heart is completely black. Our heart has become blackened over the years. It's a time of purity. It's a time of purifying the heart. They asked the Prophet ﷺ, and they said, they asked him about fasting for the majority of one's life. Then they asked him about half and a third and so on. And the Prophet, he responded, he said, shall I not inform you that which will remove the impurities of the heart? And that's what it's about. That's what Ramadan should be about. Removing these impurities that you've gained over all the years. If you're surrounded by, if you have a black heart and a darkened heart, imagine how will you possibly see through the eyes of clarity? How will you see clearly if you're surrounded by blackness and darkness, which we've been living through the majority of our lives, performing sins and committing sins? This is a time now to remove the impurity from our heart, and a time now to come back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and definitely a time not to waste this Ramadan. Wallahi, wallahi, wallahi. And I will say, and it's been mentioned before previously, no one knows. No one's guaranteed when they will live, and no one's guaranteed for how long they will live. No one's guaranteed when they're dead. What we know is people today who are with us today, it's people who were last Ramadan are not here this Ramadan.
That's right.
They've gone. They're dead. It's very important we make use of this Ramadan, not damage this Ramadan. At the end of the day, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept Ramadan from us and allow us first of all to go up to the period, to get to the period of Ramadan, so that we may, inshaAllah, fast for his sake.
All right, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. Thank you so much once again. Inshallah, our listeners, you've taken note, and we're all pumped and ready for this Ramadan. Thank you so much for coming on the show once again.
Ramadan is here. Ramadan is here. Ramadan is here. Ramadan is here.
Who decided to move? It's Ramadan. Now I got a plan before it's come and gone. Getting close to Allah, spend a lot of time. See the condition of my heart like a sonogram. Everybody knows we got to fast, but does everybody know how the time is passed? Is it sleeping all day and the night's a blast, and forgetting the reward in the month is past? I know you gonna wake up right, drinking water, maybe being pie, praying at sunrise, fasting the day, keeping that dean tight, breaking fast with some days, start out we at night. Alright, it's a blessed month, doesn't mean that it's hard that you can't have fun, but strive in your heart for your Lord the one, and be blessed by Allah when the month is done.
With us today from Amnesty International is Alex Pagliaro, the Refugee Campaign Coordinator in Sydney. Welcome to the show, Alex.
Thanks very much for having me.
Alex, we want to talk to you about the latest developments in Burma regarding the Rohingya people, but before we get on to that, we should probably try and do a little bit of background. Basically, the news has been covering the troubles and the conflict that's been happening there, but no one quite understands why is there a conflict.
Well, Burma has obviously been in a state of, serious unrest and under the rule of a military dictatorship for a very, very long time now. And, I think, it's quite interesting what we're seeing in the news at the moment, because on the one hand, you are seeing the reforms, you're seeing, the announcements of more political freedom, more freedom of the press, more economic freedom, and, the Burmese government is saying that, everything's changing. On the other hand, we're seeing an increase in violence amongst the government and officials and certain ethnic minority groups. So I suppose, that's where it comes down to is why they're targeting those groups and why the conflict remains with them.
Alex, the fact that you do mention minority groups, and particularly they happen to be an ethnic group, do you think that's a major part of the issue? That's
right. So with the Rohingya in particular, it's quite an extraordinary situation where in the 1980s, the Burmese junta passed a law that said that they were citizens of Burma. They tried to rewrite history essentially and say that the Rohingya people had, been infiltrated from other countries to cause unrest in Burma, and that they weren't really from Burma and they'd never, historically been from Burma. And so that has, for the past 30 years, rendered the Rohingya in Burma effectively stateless. So, today what we see is the vast majority of the nearly 1 million Rohingya who still live in Burma do not have citizenship rights. Children for a very long time now have not even been registered with the states, and so have no identity documents, no, nothing to even prove they exist.
Are they recognised by the international community as a part of Burma, or does the international community also see them as basically a stateless population?
No, Amnesty International and most other large NGOs and other governments as well does believe that the Rohingya should be citizens of Burma, that the Rohingya have a long history in that area of Burma, and what the Burmese government is saying is very, very widely disputed.
Well, the president of Burma has been making comments, President Feinstein, that he believes Burmese Rohingya should be taken into a third country altogether, and that the UN itself should be responsible for that removal. They're not really keen on refugee camps, but they're just saying that deportation is the solution. How is the UN reacting to that?
There's no way that the UN would support something like that, to resettle 1 million people. Just in of itself, the logistics of that are impossible. There's not 1 million spaces, in other countries for those people to go to. But beyond that, it's the actual principle of a country can't just decide it doesn't like some of the people living there and then say that the international community should just take responsibility for them. Hundreds of thousands of Rohingya have already fled. We see 500,000 of them are now in Bangladesh, and a couple of 100,000 live in Thailand, and then also they live in communities all around the world. But they're the main two countries, and even in those countries, the Rohingya in no way have safety. They are consistently at threat of being pushed back into Burma. There's a lot of reports, and sometimes it gets worse, of boatloads of Burmese Rohingya being pushed back to sea by Thai authorities, and often those boats sink at sea. So
Pakistan's come out a few times, very blatantly saying that they don't want them anymore, and they're not responsible for resettling these refugees. So I think these refugees are in a predicament. So in terms of Amnesty, what's the campaign for the Rohingya people? So what's the perceived solution to this issue?
Well, I think what needs to happen is that more pressure needs to be put on the Burmese government, given that they're, in this period of reform and trying to sort of embrace the international community, and they want sanctions lifted and all of that. The Burmese government really need to change their stance. There just is no other sustainable and long-term solution for a population of a couple of million people when you take into account all those in Burma and then Bangladesh and Thailand. 2 million people can't just be transferred to another country, so Burma really need to just accept that.
But Alex, I think the problem with actually looking to the Burmese government about this is that even the opposition, which is made up of a bunch of minority groups in Burma who were previously oppressed under the government before the reforms, this opposition's coalition has gotten together and said, well, even if we were to come into power, we don't recognise that the Rohingyas should have citizenship. So they're facing both the government and the opposition, in essence, the majority of Burma.
Well, I think that's why it comes down to international pressure, and this is not something that will change quickly. There's a long history of persecution against the Rohingya, as you said, even among other minorities, other persecuted minorities in Burma. So that they are really one of the most persecuted and at-risk minority groups in the entire world. And so the solution to that, or the way to fix that, is not easy, and unfortunately is not a short-term sort of scenario. So yeah, I do think it still does come down to international governments and NGOs and groups like Amnesty International, encouraging Burmese politicians from both sides to slowly start softening their stance on the Rohingya, because there just isn't really another option available to the world.
Alex, I think also some of these countries that are accepting or actively declining the Rohingyas need to maybe start taking some positive action also. I mean, even on our own shores with Australia, Villawood Detention Centre has a lot of refugees that actually have come from that Rohingya background. And when you do visit, they'll tell you, our families have been part of the clashes, they've been persecuted and things like that. So I think, as you said, it's not an easy solution to fix overnight. But the onus isn't just on the government. The onus is also, in the meantime, until the issue with the government is fixed, for these countries to actually actively accept these people who, as you said, are stateless and have nowhere else to go.
And I think, as you say, Tasnim, there have been quite a few Rohingyas presenting to Australia. Have there been any who've come to Amnesty, Alex?
Yeah, Amnesty is involved in a number of cases of Rohingya in Australia, and we've worked with different Rohingya community groups Australia on a number of occasions, either on individual groups or on talking to the Australian government about what they should be doing within Australia and also internationally. And you're right, and I think that sort of is at the core of the whole refugee situation around the world, where you do want those long-term sort of durable solutions, but the reality is that while things are so awful, there are always going to be people fleeing to try and find safety, and it is the responsibility of countries like Australia to accept people that arrive on our shores and give them safety. And there's no point governments, trying to, take that moral high ground with a country like Burma and saying, you should protect the Rohingya and you should embrace human rights, if Australia itself is refusing to protect Rohingya and other refugees and not really fulfilling its human rights obligations.
Double standard policies. One last question, Alex. As a regular Australian, or in fact as an international citizen, how should we be showing our support for the Rohingya people?
Well, I think, in terms of the Rohingya that are in Australia right now, as Australians, the best thing that can really happen, for all refugees, not just the Rohingya, is for more Australians to start speaking out about this issue and countering the quite horrific debate that's happening on a national level at the moment. And that's about, not firstly, I think, talking to friends and family about this issue and starting to have a bit more of a factual debate about it and create more awareness and sort of guide the debate around away from these sort of slightly hysterical slogans that seem to be really powerful. But then also it's about being an active citizen and talking to your MP and calling your MP about this situation, and whether that be what you want to see happen at an international stage or whether that be what you want to see happen on a domestic level. I think Australians are very lucky, unlike citizens of Burma, in that we can contact our MP and we can really actually have a say that way. It would be great to see more Australians taking that opportunity up.
Thank you, Alex. I think we'll end it on that empowering note. And to all listeners out there, this is something that if you feel strongly about, you can actually go out there and make a difference. And as Alex mentioned, whether it be, speaking to our MPs, and, we've got the luxury of doing that in this country. So to kind of get out there and do your bit. Alex, thank you once again for coming on the show.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for having me.
The Y Factor.
Joining us in the studio today is Anwar from the Rohingya Community in Australia. Welcome to the studio, Anwar.
Thank you.
And we've also got his friend Haroun Rashid. It's nice to meet you both. Now, Tasnim and I are talking to you today about the Rohingya issue in Burma. We've just spoken to Alex Pagliaro from Amnesty about it for some research background. But as actual Rohingyas, we're hoping to get a bit more of a personal insight into the issue. Right, Tasnim?
That's right. So can you just give our listeners some background information about the ethnic minority of Rohingyas in Burma and the fact that, how Islam fits in with with the minority group and how tensions arise with the majority, who is Burmese?
Buddhists mainly, right?
Okay, I'm Anwar from President of Burmese Rohingya Community in Australia. First of all, I would like to thank to you for inviting us to give a bit information about Rohingya and also about the current issue.
It's our pleasure.
We Rohingya based in Arakan state in Burma, and we were there for centuries ago. Although the government claimed that we came something like after 1948, but many historical people found that Rohingyas live in that area something like 16th centuries ago.
That's a very long time for a minority that people claim should not be naturalized or given citizenship.
Yeah, among the Muslims in Burma, we are the majority. And we are the only ethnic group who has own language in Muslims and own culture. And the rest, they come from India, China, and some of them also from Malaysia base and Indonesia and etc. So it is a mixed country, but we are the only, unique group, Rohingya group, who has, at the beginning, we were around 3 million. Now, because of the government policies, a lot of them run away from the government. Mm-hmm. They flee Myanmar, and around 500,000 people are in Bangladesh now. The rest is spread to Middle East and some Europe countries, but Europe and like Australia, we are minority, very minority here.
So how many have actually remained in Burma at the moment?
Official figure is around 800,000. That is the government figure, but in actually it will be more than that.
Okay, so what's the actual problem between the Rohingyas and the Burmese government?
The issue started after 1962, when the military power came into power, and they started creative problem between because Rohingya and Rakhine are the two main ethnic group in Arakan state. And we all know that everyone from Arakan, also around the world, notice that this is the government policy to divide these two groups and to make against each other.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Right.
They are quite successful because at the moment Rakhine people in that area, they hate us and they want to kill us. They treat us like animals. They kill the children. They rape women. They are burning their mosques, burning Holy
mosques.
Quran. And 27 mosques are already destroyed in Sittwe alone. That is the capital of the state. And even last week, one mosque was destroyed and a lot of Quran were destroyed and put on the street. And it's really called miserable things at the moment. People cannot go and prevent those things.
But, it's quite odd that you mentioned that, because I think in all the news reports that I've read, there was mention of a small number of Rohingyas who were killed in the recent clashes in Arakan state. But I didn't hear anything about a mosque being burnt down, or 27, as you're saying now. And I think you were mentioning to us before we went on air something about media inconsistencies. Why is that?
Because no international media is allowed to that area except the Burmese-based background media. And also those medias who are working against Rohingya. And they all are well-known anti-Rohingya. Even New York Times has criticized the Burmese medias that they are giving false information and one-sided information. And their main target is called to show the world that Rohingyas are the one who created the riot.
Not troublemakers. I mean, a lot of non-government organizations and activists have actually come out and labeled what's going on as a genocide, which is not a phrase you would actually hear in mainstream media to describe the situation. So in your view, you feel like the problem is actually underreported, and that's by virtue of the fact
that the state controls the media.
Yeah. Previously, we were thinking that it's state control, but now we understand that it's central control. The president of Burma told to the UNHCR,
the UNHCR, yeah.
Yeah, that Rohingyas are not welcome. They are illegal immigrants, and we would like to put them in a refugee camp and then to hand it over to UNHCR. If any other third country would like to take them, they can take it away.
So when the president came out and said this, the United Nations office, did not accept these statements. But what he was saying essentially was the fact that Rohingyas are not an ethnic minority that he wants in the country, basically. So you have family in the region. How have they dealt with this? So how do they go about every day, doing their thing and living in a country where they're obviously not accepted, and the president is actually asking for them to be deported to another country? So what's life like in Burma at the moment?
Burma life, if we talk about their life, we have different life. In capital, that's Yangon, ex-capital, Yangon, it's different. But in Arakan state, it's completely different. It has been known as open prison for years.
Just for the Rohingyas or for the other minorities
as well?
For Rohingyas.
They are not allowed to come to other state. They are not allowed to go to one village to another village. They are not allowed to do marriage. They are not allowed to...
Sorry, they're not allowed to do marriage. What do you mean by that?
They don't allow to get married. They don't give permission. If you get married, that means it is illegal, and then you're gonna be sent to prison.
Is that in terms of marrying someone outside the Rohingya ethnicity, or even intermarrying?
So basically, government control every aspect of a person's life. Yeah.
Yeah, and
even if you want to leave your friend's place, you have to take permission that you're staying that night in your friend's place. If you get caught, like every time, sometimes they come and check your house. If you get caught, they will take you straight away to jail.
That sounds like a concentration camp.
It's like open jail.
Prison.
It's only for the Rohingya people, but all the other peoples, they can go. Even we cannot go to main capital city like Australia. You can go to Canberra, right?
Yeah.
Like we can't go anyway.
So there's no freedom of movement.
But how is that controlled? Is something like marriage or staying at a friend's house, like you were just saying, Haroun? How do they know when you do that, or how do they control it?
They have a house list. Like everybody have their own house list. So if when they go and check, sudden check, if the house members they comes, oh, there's an unknown person in the house. So, oh, where's your home? So they straight away take the member.
And what's the punishment for that? If you
give him a jail 6 months probably, and take money bribery or beat him. Sometimes if you don't have money, they take him forced labor. The situation been happening from a long time.
Forced labor.
Yeah.
And what kind of labor would that be?
Like they take them and carry them. Their
guns, weapons, and they make them build the road, bridge.
There's been a lot of bridge building in Burma lately, hasn't there?
In our kind of state, they use only Rohingya people to
build their bridges.
Anwar and Haroun, this sounds like a really horrible situation, but the problem is the people in Burma are being oppressed, the Rohingyas. They have no other options. Pakistan's refused to have them. Thailand isn't happy. Even Australia, when they come, usually by boat, we lock them up in detention for how many, months or years to process their papers and things like that. So as people who have family back home, who have friends back home, I'm baffled to actually even think about what do they do? What are the options? So
they run away sometimes. They hide themselves.
Where,
the nearest border is Bangladesh.
Yeah.
They go there. Even they have been suffering there. Even they go there. Even Bangladesh government. They say we can't. We have enough people. We can't handle.
And Bangladesh, I think, is on friendly-ish terms with the Burmese government. They try not to exasperate the situation.
Having some business
because
with them.
In a year, Bangladesh have export from Burma $9.5 billion and import from Burma import from Bangladesh $1.5 billion.
It's an economic situation. They don't. Yeah.
So nobody gonna conflict between each countries.
You were saying even Saudi Arabia, you would find Rohingya minorities in Saudi Arabia. So are they actually recognized in Saudi Arabia, or again are they illegal?
No, they have a Burma Ekama. Burma Ekama, like they give a Ekama. So
Ekama, okay. So
it's like a
temporary
residence. So some of them have it, some of them doesn't have it. I know a lot of people doesn't have it. So they are in very bad situation. Some of them, they are died there,
in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia.
So it's not the best third option, basically.
Yeah.
I just want to circle back to mention of Bangladesh. Now, a lot of the media reports coming out of Burma claim that Rohingyas are originally from Bangladesh and therefore they should all just move back there and it should be Bangladesh's problem.
It is actually, during British under colony, it was single country.
Burma and Bangladesh was one country.
Then our country state was included to the area.
Yeah.
So it's when they give freedom, independence, and they separated the country.
Yeah.
Bangladesh border and Burmese border, and then some of the Muslims were in this side, some of the Yakai Buddhists are the other side.
Yeah.
And Bangladesh recognized Yakai Buddhists as citizen of Bangladesh. However, the Burmese government does not recognize Muslims as citizen of Burma.
In Bangladesh, there's almost 3 million monks. The one Buddhists in there. They are citizens of Bangladesh.
And they're accepted, but the Muslims are not accepted.
In Burma.
In other situations, for example, even in Palestine, which is a very ethnically divided land, you still have, for example, Jewish and Christian minorities that are Palestinian. But with the situation in Burma, for example, it sounds like a very ethnically Rohingya and religiously Islamic situation. And it's actually really sad to see that the Muslim community in general globally, whether it be, on an international level or even in Australia, don't recognise the plight of the Rohingya people.
I don't think it's that they don't recognise it. I think there is a major issue with awareness. A lot of people just don't know that there's something happening in Burma. And as I was saying earlier, watching the news reports in Australia, I think it was mentioned when the clashes happened about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But then it dies down.
And exactly.
It's not being stopped. It's been continuously going on from 1942. It's been after 10 years they've been doing these things. So they want to just banish us, one whole race community, but they actually successful in a way because we are actually going down in criminality actually.
And I agree also on what you are saying. Actually, even Bangladesh, I met some students the other day, and they were saying that they didn't know anything about Rohingya till recent issue.
Yeah.
I mean, although they are neighbors of us, and more than around 500,000 people are living in Bangladesh, but they don't know about that. So that's another issue, because we are a small group and our voice is not going further. That's why people are not aware of it.
I really appreciate both of you coming on the show today, and I think a major part of the aim behind this episode is to actually raise awareness to the plight of the Rohingya people.
And the perfect timing of that, of course, is the start of Ramadan. So we want to encourage people to help in some way.
That's right. So if you're interested, to our dear listeners, if you are interested, inshallah, in getting involved with this Burmese Rohingya community in Australia, you can actually visit their website, which is www.brca.org.au or freerohingya.org.au. So that was brca.org.au or freerohingya.org.au. If you want further information, you can contact Brother Anwar on 0432 574 315. That was 0432 574 315.
And they do also have a Facebook page, because Facebook seems to be the most convenient means at the moment, and that would be BRCA Australia.
Burmese Rohingya Community in Australia. There's a fan page, one account.
And also, speaking of Ramadan, as Miran mentioned, Brother Anwar was just telling us off air that a lot of the times aid, and whether it be in the form of money or clothes or food or things like that, don't actually reach these areas because of very strict government control. However, they are working with Muslim community groups in the area and are actually obtaining permits from the government. They had a shipment that actually was sent yesterday. So inshallah, they're just waiting on final confirmation that it is allowed to go through. So if you are interested, again, just contact the Burmese Rohingya community in Australia, and inshallah they'll let you know a bit more about it.
UN is trying to go there, and at the moment UN has some access, but what happens is when UN goes there and the state government control them, and most of the aids are receiving only the Yakai Buddhists. They are not actually displaced people. The displaced people is Rohingya people, because all of the villages burnt Rohingya villages, and some of the houses surrounding the Rohingya villages of Yakai Buddhist people, their houses been burned down, but not by us, because of the fire that's transferred to the other side. The government figure was around 5,000 only, and we are around 80,000 people placed. So the ratio is too much different.
So what we're saying is that there's a lot of inconsistencies in information that's out there about Rohingya people in Burma, and what you are telling us are the actual true facts and figures of what's going on. So I think the best thing we can encourage our listeners to do is to go to those websites and the Facebook page that Tasnim just mentioned, or you may call Brother Anwar. He's very happy to talk to you about the issue. Inshallah, the Y Factor will be providing links to all of these websites and pages on our Facebook page as this airs. So if you can't find it yourself, you're very welcome to come to our page, the Y Factor 87.6 FM, and look up all these links, inshallah. And hopefully, Anwar, you were saying that there was a protest in Canberra about a week ago in front of
a month ago.
In front of the Burmese embassy.
In front of the parliament.
In front of Parliament. Okay, great. See, we didn't even hear about that one. And inshallah, there'll be more.
ABC News.
ABC News.
SBS.
Yeah, ABC has and SBS are the two that have mainly been reporting on the issue. And there's also another group on Facebook called SOS Rohingya, and they've been mentioning that they're organising some sort of protest coming up soon. So if you want to look at their page for updates as well, we'd really encourage that. Anwar and Haroun, thank you very much for coming into the studio and talking to us today about this issue. I think with Ramadan at the moment, I think all we could really do is lend our prayers to the cause. Yeah.
I just quickly want to say that this video, the presentation we uploaded in YouTube, BRCA Australia. It's a short, but if you want to know about Rohingya, you can know what's happening
by watching the video. Inshallah, we'll have that link to our website.
45 minutes video.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
We'll put it
Inshallah,
on our
we'll
website, inshallah.
And
yes.
I will just last one. What I would like to say, what we call it RNDP party, that is Yakai National Party, and they are the main people who are doing this raid and who are killing our Muslim Rohingya people. They want to create a state like Israel. They already gave a speech in the news in the journal that they want to create Arkan as Israel. All of the Muslims will be driven out of the city, so Muslims cannot come to the city. They want to create a state, something like that.
Sorry, is that the government or the opposition groups?
The opposition group, and I think they already got the support by President Thein Sein's speech.
So both the government and the opposition essentially want to drive the Rohingya out of Burma?
Out of Burma, exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much yet again. I mean, I don't really know what to say. It's just such a horrible situation, but may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease the suffering of the Rohingya people in Burma.
Thank you very much to you too, and for letting us to give information about the Rohingya, and would like to request to everyone to help Rohingyas in Burma. They do need your help, and they are crying for your help.
The Y Factor.
من ثنيات الوداع وجب الشكر علينا ما دعا لله داع أيها المبعوث فينا جئت بالأمر المطاع جئت شرفت المدينة مرحبا يا خير داع. His eyes slowly rising, sunrise warms the horizon.
The Y Factor.